The mall on Saturday afternoon was packed, parents tugging along restless children, shoppers bustling between stores, and music humming faintly from every direction. Among them was a little girl named Emma, no older than 7, holding tightly to a stuffed giraffe with one hand while the other clung to her nanny's sleeve. Her dark curls bounced with every step, but her breathing had started to slow. She tugged gently on her nanny's coat. "I feel funny," she whispered. The nanny barely noticed. She was too busy scrolling through her phone, only glancing up when Emma stopped walking. The girl's face had turned a pale gray, her lips tinged blue. She clutched at her chest, wheezing. A moment later, she collapsed. At first, no one noticed. A few passers-by glanced, unsure whether it was a tantrum or something more serious. The nanny screamed, finally registering what was happening, but she was paralyzed, fumbling her phone, unable to dial, her hands shaking. Emma's body curled on the cold floor, gasping, eyes wide with fear. Then a man appeared. He moved with a swiftness that came from experience, not panic. He was tall, in a faded navy jacket, a little grease on his jeans, ordinary in every way except for the calm intensity in his eyes. He knelt down beside the girl without hesitation. "She's in respiratory distress," he said firmly to the gathering crowd. "Does anyone have an inhaler, any kind of albuterol?" Silence. No one moved. The man looked down again, assessing. "You with her?" he asked the nanny. The woman nodded, trembling. "She has asthma. I don't know where her inhaler is." "I thought no time," he interrupted. He tilted Emma's head gently, checking her airway. Then he opened his backpack, pulling out a clean cloth and a small medical pouch, clearly well worn. "I'm going to help you breathe, sweetheart. Stay with me." He began a rescue technique, carefully timed puffs of air, subtle chest compressions. His own daughter stood behind him, Lily, about the same age as Emma, holding on to the man's jacket. She didn't cry. She just watched, wide-eyed, used to seeing her father step in when no one else would. Minutes passed like hours. Emma's breath slowly returned. Her eyes blinked rapidly, lips regaining color. The man let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "She's stabilizing," he said, not to anyone in particular. Then he looked to the nanny. "Get her to urgent care now. Call her mother, and don't ever leave her without her inhaler." The nanny nodded, still stunned. A security guard finally arrived, followed by a small crowd of curious onlookers. But the man had already stood up, hoisting his bag over his shoulder. "Wait," someone called. "What's your name?" But he was already walking away, Lily's small hand in his. Just a man in a crowd again, lost in the noise of the mall. No one knew his name. No one knew he had once been a paramedic. No one knew he had lost his wife to a system that moved too slowly. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to go home, behind them. Emma sat up slowly, whispering to no one in particular. He looked like an angel, and far away in a glass tower downtown, her mother, Evelyn Grant, CEO of one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country, was about to receive a phone call that would shake her carefully built world. Evelyn Grant didn't answer unknown numbers. Her assistants were trained to filter the trivial from the urgent. But when her phone lit up with her daughter's nanny's name, Evelyn stepped out of the boardroom mid-presentation without apology. The voice on the other end was frantic, barely coherent. Words like collapsed, asthma, and stranger sliced through Evelyn's well-guarded composure. For a moment, she forgot the glass walls behind her, the board members watching, the quarterly numbers displayed on the screen. "Is she breathing now?" Evelyn asked, her voice cold but controlled. She's okay now. I swear, the nanny sobbed. He helped her some man. He just, he saved her and disappeared. Evelyn didn't respond right away. Her mind had already shifted to triage mode. She canceled the rest of her meetings, barked orders into her headset, and instructed her driver to meet her downstairs immediately. Every second between that call and arriving at the mall felt like a personal failure. When she found Emma in the urgent care wing of the mall clinic, the girl was resting, a soft wheeze still in her chest, but color returned to her cheeks. She smiled weakly when she saw her mother. "Mommy, I had a dream," she said. "A man helped me. He had kind eyes." Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to her daughter's forehead. "It wasn't a dream. Sweetheart, you're safe now." But inside, Evelyn's stomach twisted. She had seen many emergencies in her life, financial, legal, strategic, but never had she felt so helpless. Someone else had stepped in for her, someone she didn't know, someone who had vanished. Later that evening, she fired the nanny. It wasn't a loud or emotional dismissal, just a line in Evelyn's voice that made clear the woman would never work in childcare again. Meanwhile, across the city, Daniel sat quietly at his small kitchen table, watching Lily nibble on a peanut butter sandwich. The apartment was modest, but warm. A tiny potted plant sat on the windowsill beside a worn photo of a woman with kind eyes, Lily's mother. "You were brave today," he said softly. Lily shrugged. "She looked like me when I couldn't breathe." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, that's why we help when we can." He didn't mention the crowd that froze, the cameras that started rolling too late, or the questions that chased him down the mall corridor. He just cleaned up dinner, checked Lily's homework, and went to bed with a quiet heart. He had done what anyone should do, what he was trained to do, and he asked for nothing in return. But the next morning, a private investigator knocked on his neighbor's door, flashing a photo of a little girl with curls and the name Emma Grant written underneath. Back in her penthouse, Evelyn stood at the window, sipping a glass of water, staring into the skyline. For the first time in years, she was losing sleep over someone who hadn't signed a contract or owed her money. She needed to find that man, not for an article, not for PR, because in his absence, something inside her had shifted, and she didn't know how to explain it, only that she wasn't done with him yet. Evelyn didn't cry, not when her husband died, not when she took over his company 6 days after the funeral, not when she signed the documents that would make her one of the youngest billionaires in the country. Emotion was something she'd long since buried under meetings, milestones, and mergers. But now, in the quiet hours after midnight, she found herself sitting on Emma's bed, brushing strands of hair from her daughter's forehead, unable to sleep. Emma had fallen into a gentle rhythm of breath, but every now and then, she whimpered a small, involuntary reminder of what had happened. Evelyn reached out and held her daughter's hand. That man's face lingered in her mind, not the details of his appearance, but his stillness, his calm in the middle of chaos, the way he didn't wait for permission. He just acted, as if her daughter's life mattered to him in a way even Evelyn hadn't demonstrated that day. She stood, pulled the blankets up, and walked back to her office. On her desk was a tablet her assistant had compiled reports, mall security footage, and a few blurry screenshots from onlookers' phones. Evelyn stared at the screen. There he was, a man in worn jeans, a child beside him, a hand on Emma's back. No name, no contact, no interest in being seen. He had disappeared before security could speak with him. In the video clip, Emma reached up to him with her tiny hand, just before he walked away. Evelyn paused the video there. Her jaw tightened. At 8:00 a.m., she summoned her private investigator, a quiet man named Harris who had worked for her for over a decade. She handed him the tablet. Find him. Quietly. I don't want headlines. I just want a name. Harris raised an eyebrow. You want to offer him something, a reward? I don't know what I want, she said, her voice low. But I want to know who he is. Later that afternoon, in a neighborhood far removed from glass towers and rooftop pools, Daniel cleaned grease from under his nails at the repair shop. He had picked up a few shifts at the garage to supplement his part-time work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him time with Lily. His coworker slapped him on the back. You see the mall story on the news, some guy saved a rich kid. Said he vanished before they could thank him? Daniel only smiled faintly. Yeah, hope they're doing okay. You'd think someone like that would be on TV or something by now. People love a hero. Daniel turned back to the engine he was working on. Not everyone wants to be one. Meanwhile, back at her company's headquarters, Evelyn stared out the window of her corner office. The city looked the same, but she didn't feel the same. She was a woman who made decisions fast and moved on faster. But now there was something gnawing at her. Not guilt, she had no patience for that, but something softer, harder to name. She had built her life to be invincible. And in a matter of minutes, a stranger had reminded her she was anything but. That night, as she tucked Emma in, the girl whispered, Is he coming back? Evelyn smoothed her daughter's hair. Who the man? One who made it better? Evelyn hesitated, her voice barely audible. I hope so. She didn't know why she said it, but for the first time in years, Evelyn Grant hoped for something she couldn't control. Harris didn't take long. 3 days after Evelyn gave the order, he returned with a thin folder. No dramatics, no preamble. He placed it on her desk as she reviewed the next quarter's projections. That's him, Harris said simply. Name's Daniel Reed, 38, former paramedic. Widower, lives in the Lincoln Grove district, works part-time at Miller's Auto, has a daughter Lily, age 7. Evelyn's pen froze mid-signature. She lifted her eyes slowly. Widower wife passed 5 years ago. Cancer. He left emergency services soon after. Has no criminal record, no debts, no lawsuits. Keeps his head down. Doesn't even have social media. Harris slid a few photographs from the folder, Daniel walking Lily to school. Daniel under a car at the garage. Daniel laughing with neighbors on a sidewalk. No stage lights. No crowd. Just a man quietly surviving. Evelyn sat back, letting the information settle. She didn't know what she had expected, a flashy Samaritan, a man with a message or ambition. Maybe someone who would have tried to turn the moment into something for himself. But Daniel Reed had walked away. That made her curiosity sharper, somehow more personal. She flipped through the files slowly. It wasn't about owing him anymore. It was about knowing. Knowing why he acted the way he did. Why he didn't wait to be thanked. Why he looked so calm when everyone else froze. She closed the folder. I want to meet him. Harris hesitated. And if he says no, then I'll respect it, she said. Then after a pause, but I don't think he will. That same afternoon, across the city, Daniel helped Lily with her spelling homework. She sat cross-legged on the couch, brows furrowed as she sounded out the word, breathe. You got it, Daniel said, tapping the word gently. Remember how we practiced? She nodded, smiling, like when I had my episode last month. You helped me breathe. Daniel softened. That's right. She looked up. Is the girl in the mall okay? Daniel nodded. I think so. I hope so. He didn't admit that he thought about her too, that strange little moment, the softness in the girl's hand when she reached for him. Something in that mall had stirred an ache he hadn't felt in years. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony. The city was quiet here, humble. The kind of place where people passed casserole dishes to neighbors and left their shoes by the door. He lit a candle on the small table beside him, his wife's favorite tradition. When life felt heavy, she lit one and sat in silence. Daniel did the same now. He didn't know that while he watched the flickering flame, a black car pulled up 2 streets away. Evelyn didn't step out. She sat in the back seat, eyes trained on the small, second-floor apartment window glowing in warm light. She could see the man sitting alone, unaware, a child's artwork taped to the wall behind him. He had no idea who was watching, and she had no idea why she couldn't look away. The sun rose gently over Lincoln Grove, casting golden light across the quiet neighborhood. On a Saturday morning, most families took to the local park, a modest space with old benches, a rusting jungle gym, and the kind of sand pit that never quite dried. It wasn't luxurious, but it was enough for children to feel free. Daniel brought Lily there every weekend. She ran ahead of him that morning, her pink sneakers kicking up dust as she joined a few other kids near the swings. Daniel found his usual bench in the shade, coffee in hand, already easing into the rhythm of rest. What he didn't know was that he wasn't the only parent who had circled that park on their calendar. Across town, Evelyn Grant had pulled into the gravel lot with Emma in the back seat. The driver offered to wait, but Evelyn waved him off. Today, she wanted no barriers, no schedules, no suit. Emma had been unusually persistent that week. She kept asking about the park, the other girls' park. She called it, and Evelyn, in a rare moment of surrender, had said yes. Now, walking hand in hand toward the playground, she wasn't sure what she expected. But when Emma suddenly broke free and sprinted toward the swings, Evelyn's heart skipped, because there she was, Lily, and just a few feet away, sitting on the bench, was the man she had been watching behind tinted glass. Daniel stood up as Emma and Lily collided in a whirlwind of giggles and introductions. The girls had remembered each other without hesitation. There was a kind of memory children carried that adults often forgot, one not built on names, but on moments that mattered. He noticed Evelyn a second later. She was dressed plainly, no power heels, no assistance, no performance. Just jeans, a soft blouse, and something unreadable in her expression. She looked both out of place and strangely at home. Daniel gave her a polite nod. "Didn't think I'd see you again." Evelyn approached. Carefully. "Emma wanted to come. I didn't know we'd find you here, but I'm glad we did." There was an awkward pause, not tense, just full of things unsaid. Then Daniel gestured to the bench. "You're welcome to sit." She did. For a while, they just watched. The girls laughed as they pushed each other on the tire swing, sand flying with every leap. Daniel sipped his coffee. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap, unsure what to do with the stillness. "You saved her," she said at last, not looking at him. "And then you walked away." Daniel kept his gaze on the playground. "She didn't need me after that. You were coming. You didn't ask who she was. Didn't matter." She glanced at him. "That's rare." Daniel shrugged. "I used to work emergency response. You stop asking who's worth saving real quick." Evelyn was quiet. Something about the way he said it felt like more than a statement. It felt like a scar. "She talks about you," she said. "Both of them do." Daniel smiled faintly. They remember what matters. They fell into a surprisingly easy rhythm, exchanging stories about bedtime routines and vegetables their daughters refused to eat. No titles, no comparisons, Just two parents beneath the same morning sun, trying their best. At one point, Lily ran over, breathless. "Can Emma come over to play sometime?" Daniel looked to Evelyn. She hesitated for a second, but then, for the first time in years, smiled without effort. "We'll make it happen." And as the girls ran off again, their laughter echoing through the trees, Daniel and Evelyn sat back. Two strangers, two parents, two lives that were never supposed to touch, now overlapping like sunlight through leaves soft, quiet, and almost imperceptibly changing everything. The invitation wasn't planned. Evelyn didn't extend them often, especially not to strangers, especially not to men she'd met in parks. But that evening, as she watched Emma drawing pictures of Lily with wild colors and excited scribbles, something shifted. "Would you like to come over for dinner?" she asked quietly over the phone, her voice unfamiliar even to herself. Daniel paused. "You sure?" "Yes," she replied. "I think it might be good for them, for all of us." There was a long silence before he answered. "All right." That Friday evening, Daniel and Lily stood in front of a sleek, modern townhouse tucked in a gated corner of the city. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Glass, stone, silence. A home that looked built to keep the world out. Lily held a small potted plant they brought as a gift. "Do we have to give it right away?" she whispered. Daniel smiled. "We'll see how it goes." Inside, Evelyn had set the table herself. No private chef, no silver trays, just roasted chicken, simple sides, and the quiet pulse of nerves. When the doorbell rang, Emma was the first to run, flinging the door open with a squeal. Lily, the girls disappeared upstairs within seconds, leaving Evelyn and Daniel facing each other again, this time inside her world. "You didn't have to cook," Daniel said as he stepped into the softly lit dining room. "I didn't," she replied dryly, then caught herself. "I mean, I did. I wanted to." Daniel nodded, removing his jacket, folding it over the back of the chair like he was used to being a guest in homes that didn't belong to him. Dinner was quiet at first, polite. Forks against plates, murmured thanks, clinks of glasses. Evelyn found herself watching Daniel more than eating how he cut Lily's chicken without asking, how he reminded her to say thank you, how he laughed softly when she spoke too fast. He didn't try to impress. He didn't lean into the moment, and somehow that made him harder to ignore. Midway through the meal, Evelyn's fingers brushed the edge of her wine glass and stilled. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. Daniel looked up. "Miss what?" "The sirens, the urgency, saving people." He considered that. "I miss knowing exactly what to do," he said. "I miss helping without wondering what comes after. But no, I don't miss what it took from me." Evelyn nodded, her gaze falling. "I lost my husband to a heart attack in the middle of a shareholders' retreat," she said, voice quieter than before. "By the time I got to him, he was gone. I was late." Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't offer sympathy, just listened. He used to say we'd slow down one day. That work could wait. I kept telling him not yet. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "I built this house for the life we never got to live." There was a long pause, full of ghosts neither had expected to name tonight. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. Evelyn finally looked at him. "So am I." After dinner, the girls staged a dance performance in the living room, spinning in socks, their laughter bouncing off the marble floors. Daniel clapped along, smiling more than Evelyn had seen since they met. And when Emma pulled her mother's hand and begged her to join, Evelyn hesitated, but then she took her shoes off. And for a moment, just one Evelyn Grant laughed like someone who remembered what it meant to be whole. Later that night, as Daniel helped Lily into her coat by the front door, Evelyn stood beside him, holding the potted plant he almost forgot. "I didn't know I needed this," she admitted softly. He met her eyes, the same calm still there. "None of us ever do," he said, "until we're in it." She watched them leave, standing barefoot in her front hallway, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Monday morning arrived with its usual wait meetings stacked end to end, reports waiting for signature, and a CEO's face carved back into steel. Evelyn had slipped into her routine again, but something was different. Somewhere between Daniel's quiet strength and the way Emma had giggled through her makeshift dance recital, a fracture had opened inside her. Not the kind that weakens, but the kind that lets something else in. She was in the middle of reviewing a supply chain audit when her assistant barged in. Pale. "You need to see this." Evelyn looked up, brows already knitting. Her tablet was slid across the desk. On the screen, a news segment was playing. Grainy footage from the mall, taken weeks ago of Daniel kneeling beside Emma. A local news anchor narrated over the clip, dramatic and curious. A single father saves the daughter of tech mogul Evelyn Grant and disappears before anyone can thank him. "Who is this mystery man?" Her fingers tightened around the screen. "How did this get out?" she asked coldly. Her assistant shook her head. "We don't know. Probably from a bystander who uploaded it last week. Now it's trending." By lunchtime, the story had made national outlets. Headlines read, "CEO's daughter saved by unnamed stranger. Now he's been found. Hero dad from Lincoln Grove. Rescued billionaire's child without knowing who she was." Daniel's name was out. His workplace had been swarmed by cameras. His home address leaked online. The sudden spotlight was more than just inconvenient, it was invasive. When Evelyn called, he didn't answer, so she went herself. She found him in the back of the auto shop, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight. His boss stood nearby, helpless, fielding another round of media calls. Daniel didn't say anything as she approached. "I didn't leak it," Evelyn said, breath short. "I never meant for this to happen." "I know," he muttered. "Doesn't matter now." She looked at him, noticing the hard lines in his face, the quiet disappointment, not in her, but in the way the world worked. "They want you on morning shows, talk shows. People love the mechanic saves heiress angle," he said bitterly. "They think it's heartwarming. You don't want that." "No, I didn't do it for attention. I know." He wiped his hands on a rag. "But my daughter, she came home crying because some stranger knocked on our door and asked if she felt lucky her dad was a hero." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she said again, the words feeling too small. He sighed, leaning against the tool cart. "This was never supposed to be a story." She stepped closer. "Then let's make sure it ends the right way." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I'll shut it down. I have media teams that can redirect the narrative. I can make it disappear." He studied her for a long moment. "Why do you care?" The question wasn't an accusation, it was genuine. Evelyn looked away, then back at him. "Because you didn't ask for anything, and I'm not used to that. Because you did more for my daughter than I could. And because I don't want you to disappear again." Daniel didn't respond right away. Somewhere behind them, a car horn honked. Kids yelled. The world moved on. But in the silence between them, something held still. "I didn't ask for attention," he said finally, "but I won't run from it either. Just make sure Lily's not the one paying the price." Evelyn nodded. She won't. As she walked away, Daniel watched her go. For a woman known for building walls, she was starting to learn how to leave a door open. And he wasn't sure what that meant yet, but it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the middle of something quietly important. The media storm quieted over the next week. Evelyn had done what she promised, redirected the narrative, pulled legal strings, and quietly arranged for Daniel's name and address to be scrubbed from every platform that mattered. The story faded, replaced by the next viral headline. The world moved on, but something between them hadn't. Daniel and Evelyn met again the following Sunday, not in a boardroom, not in the garage, but at a quiet coffee shop halfway between their lives. They chose it deliberately, not her world, not his, neutral ground. Evelyn arrived first, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, no entourage, no driver. She didn't want this conversation buffered by anything. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, Lily in tow. She ran straight to Emma, who was already drawing at a side table, and the two girls disappeared into a quiet corner of crayons and whispered laughter. Daniel sat across from Evelyn. His hands were rough, nails still stained from work. She noticed them. He noticed her silence. "You look tired," he said. She didn't bristle at it. She nodded. "I haven't slept much since that day in the mall." He sipped his coffee, waiting. "I used to think I could outwork grief," she began. "Out-organize it, turn it into a system. My husband used to laugh at that. He'd say I'd probably try to schedule my own breakdown." Daniel gave a faint smile. "Did you almost?" A long breath passed between them. "I've been angry for years," she continued. "Angry at him for leaving. Angry at myself for being too late. But mostly, angry at how empty all of this feels. The house, the title, the constant chase." Daniel looked out the window, not judging, just listening. "I lost someone too," he said. "But it didn't hit me until months later when Lily asked if her mom would still smell the flowers we picked. That's when I broke." Evelyn's gaze dropped to her lap. "I don't know how to be soft," she admitted. "I never learned." Daniel's voice was low. "You don't have to be soft. Just real." That silenced her. Outside, rain began to fall, a light drizzle on the window pane. Inside, two people sat surrounded by the hum of others, but in a world of their own, strangers not long ago. Two parents walking different roads of the same loss. "I'm scared," Evelyn said quietly, "of needing people again, of trusting." Daniel met her eyes. "So am I." Neither offered promises. Neither reached for the other. But something shifted. A door that had stayed locked for years finally cracked. When it was time to leave, Emma and Lily hugged like sisters. Evelyn and Daniel shared a look that said more than words could. Later that night, Evelyn stood at her window, watching the rain run down the glass. She had spent years controlling every piece of her life, measured, precise, untouched. But lately, something unstructured had begun to grow in her life. Something human, something she wasn't sure how to handle. And yet, for once, she didn't want to stop it. The house was dressed in gold and white, the kind of elegance only the wealthy could afford and the lonely rarely noticed. Balloon arches framed the grand entrance. Servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of hors d'oeuvres, and a live-string quartet played softly from a corner of the courtyard. Emma's birthday party was a carefully orchestrated event planned months in advance by Evelyn's assistant, complete with a guest list curated from elite social circles, CEOs' children, trust fund toddlers, board members, a carefully posed affair, as expected of Evelyn Grant. But none of that mattered to Emma, because the only people she truly wanted there were Lily and her dad. Mom, She said that morning, still in pajamas. Did you invite them? Evelyn looked at her daughter for a long moment. I did. Promise, I promise. And she had. Against the soft resistance of her assistant, against the awkward glances of her social advisors, Evelyn had personally called Daniel. He'd hesitated, unsure, but agreed on one condition. No photos, no reporters, just a party for the girls. When Daniel and Lily arrived, they were met with stares. Guests in polished shoes paused. Some whispered, others just observed. Daniel wore a blazer he hadn't put on in years. Lily held a wrapped gift with a handmade card taped to the top. She looked around the mansion, her eyes wide but not afraid. Emma spotted them first and ran straight into Lily's arms, squealing. I told them you were coming, she beamed. Nobody believed me. Lily giggled, hugging her tightly. It's so big here. You live in a castle. Daniel stood awkwardly by the entrance until Evelyn approached. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice softer than usual. He nodded. It means a lot to her. It means something to me, too. Evelyn introduced him to a few of the guests, but Daniel felt the way their eyes lingered on his hands, on his quiet demeanor. One man asked him if he was Evelyn's new security. Another assumed he was the mechanic from the news. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She stayed near him, almost protectively. The woman who once managed a billion-dollar company with cold efficiency now stood beside a man most would have dismissed at first glance, and she didn't waver. Later, as the children played by the pool and the sun began to dip, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. Emma stood on a small makeshift stage. She held a microphone meant for the entertainers, but ignored the script entirely. I want to say thank you, she said boldly, her curls bouncing as she spoke. Not for the cake or the toys. I want to thank Lily and her daddy, because last month I couldn't breathe, and he helped me, and he didn't even ask who I was. The crowd was still. Emma's eyes sparkled. And then Lily became my best friend. And I think that's the best gift I ever got. Evelyn blinked fast, caught between pride and something deeper, something raw. Daniel looked down, quietly humbled. A few parents clapped. Others exchanged polite smiles. But in that moment, nothing else mattered, because the only applause that counted was from two little girls who saw no wealth, no class, no walls, only kindness. After the party, as the last of the guests left and the string quartet packed away their instruments, Evelyn walked Daniel and Lily to the gate. You didn't have to stay the whole time, she said. Daniel looked at her. I did. For them. Then, before she could thank him again, he added, She's a good kid. You're raising her right. Evelyn smiled faintly, the compliment sinking deeper than he probably knew. I'm learning, she said, and as he took Lily's hand and turned to go, she realized something. This wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was connection, and maybe, just maybe, it was becoming something more. The morning after the party, Evelyn walked into the boardroom of her tech empire, shoulders squared, chin high, but with something different in her eyes, something softer. That was the first thing the board noticed. The second was that she didn't seem interested in the quarterly projections. They had gathered to discuss a massive international expansion deal with a foreign conglomerate. It would elevate the company's global reach and, more importantly to them, cement Evelyn as a legacy CEO in the industry. The deal was close, just a few signatures away. But as the lead investor pulled up a social media slide showing blurry, zoomed-in images from Emma's party, including one of Daniel standing near Evelyn, holding Lily's hand, the room began to shift. We're getting questions. One executive said delicately, about him. Evelyn didn't move. The public image you've built is precise. Another added, controlled, aspirational. And now it's being associated with a man who runs a repair shop in Lincoln Grove. It raises questions about your judgment, about your associations. Still, Evelyn said nothing. What's more, the investor leaned forward. Is that the board is concerned this relationship, if that's what it is, may interfere with the brand? With the message of strength and exclusivity we've spent a decade curating. Evelyn looked around the room. Men in tailored suits, women with spreadsheets in front of them. No one asked about the real story. No one mentioned what Daniel had done, only what he wasn't. A man with no pedigree, a man who made her look human. She closed her folder slowly. Let me be clear, she said, voice low but resolute. My daughter is alive because of him, and what he gave us has no price tag. Silence. She stood. If this company can't survive my humanity, then maybe it was never as strong as you thought. One man coughed awkwardly. So, you're walking away from the deal. I'm walking away from pretending, she replied, and from letting other people decide what makes someone worthy of standing next to me. By the time she exited the room, the deal had begun to unravel. She didn't care. She drove herself to Daniel's apartment that afternoon. No driver, no assistant, no script. He answered the door with a wrench in hand, caught mid-repair. His shirt was smudged with grease. He looked surprised to see her, but not unkind. I thought you might be done with all this, he said quietly. She shook her head. I was almost done with myself, she said. He didn't ask what had happened, didn't need to. I told a room full of men that you were the strongest person I'd ever met, she added. Not because of what you own, but because of how you show up for people, without needing to be seen. Daniel stepped back, letting her inside. She stood there in his small, lived-in apartment. The couch sagged slightly. The air smelled faintly of coffee and engine oil, and yet it felt warmer than any room in her mansion. Why are you really here? Evelyn, he asked. She met his eyes. No deflection, no armor. Because I'm tired of pretending that everything I built matters more than the people I've met since it almost all fell apart. She took a step closer. I don't know what this is between us, but I know I want to find out. Daniel stared at her, searching for any trace of performance. He found none. And then finally he nodded. Okay, he said, but only if you stay for dinner. It's grilled cheese night. Evelyn laughed, something breaking loose inside her. I think I can survive that. And so, in a kitchen barely big enough for two, the woman who once dined with heads of state found herself slicing tomatoes beside a man who had never once tried to impress her. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Weeks passed, not with the speed of a whirlwind romance or the certainty of a well-timed plan, but slowly, gently, like two people relearning how to live in the presence of someone who saw them without filters. Evelyn began showing up in places no one expected, not in boardrooms or conference calls, but in Daniel's world in a folding chair at Lily's school play, in a modest diner on a Friday night, in the quiet aisles of a hardware store helping him pick out paint for his front porch. And Daniel, for his part, stopped waiting for the catch. He had built his life around survival, around holding joy at arm's length, just in case it disappeared again. But Evelyn didn't ask him to change. She didn't ask for permission either. She simply came as she was, and in doing so, gave him space to be exactly who he'd always been. There were no declarations, No grand gestures, just moments. Like Emma falling asleep on Daniel's shoulder while the four of them watched a movie, or Evelyn helping Lily with her science project while wearing one of Daniel's old t-shirts after accidentally spilling lemonade on hers. Then came the night Evelyn stood on his small balcony and told him she had declined a seat on an international tech panel. They wanted me to speak about leadership, she said, her voice calm. But lately, I think leadership looks more like showing up at school pickup than flying across the world for applause. Daniel smiled, leaned on the rail beside her. They're not going to like that. I'm not doing it for them. She turned toward him, then closer now, not just in space but in truth. I used to think I was broken, she said, too cold, too calculating. But I think I was just protecting myself. And maybe I don't need to anymore. Daniel didn't say much. He never did. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and let his thumb rest against her cheek. I don't need perfect, he whispered. Just honest. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second long enough to let it sink in. Then she opened them, leaned in, and kissed him. Not with urgency, not with fear, with memory. The memory of a life she thought she had lost, and the one she had quietly been rebuilding without realizing it around the man who'd once saved her daughter's breath with no idea who she was. Later that night, Evelyn stood in his living room while Daniel washed dishes and the girls played upstairs. She looked at the photos taped to the fridge. Lily's drawings. An old Polaroid of Daniel and his wife young, hopeful, frozen in a time Evelyn never knew. She didn't feel threatened by the photo. She felt humbled by it, because she could see now he had loved before. Deeply. He had lost and still chosen to love again. That's what she remembered. That's what mattered. And as she joined him at the sink, bumping her shoulder against his like they'd done it 100 times, she thought this. This is what the heart remembers when it finally learns to breathe again. It was a quiet Sunday morning, no cameras, no crowds, just the sound of birds outside the apartment window, the soft tapping of bare feet on the floor, and the smell of pancakes drifting from the kitchen. Daniel stood at the stove, flipping pancakes while Lily and Emma giggled over syrup designs at the table. Evelyn poured coffee not in a designer mug, not handed to her by an assistant, but from Daniel's chipped ceramic pot. She'd gotten used to the scratches on his countertops, the creaks in the floor, the rhythm of this small, beautiful life. This was their new normal. The world still waited outside. Evelyn still ran a company. Daniel still took shifts at the garage. But the edges between their worlds had blurred. They no longer lived in separate orbits. They met each other in the middle, where it mattered most. That afternoon, they all returned to the place where it began them all. It wasn't planned. Emma simply asked, on the drive back from the park, "Can we go there?" Where I saw stars in my eyes, she meant the place where she collapsed, where Daniel caught her, where Lily stood watching, not knowing she was witnessing the moment that would change everything. They agreed, hand in hand. The four of them walked through the mall's wide corridors, past the food court, past the benches where strangers still sat with bags at their feet, and toward the tiled spot near the fountain where Emma had once fallen. No one noticed them now. There were no flashing lights or panicked voices, just the quiet echo of footsteps, and a little girl who looked around the place she once nearly died and smiled. "Thank you for helping me," Emma whispered, looking up at Daniel. He crouched beside her. "You helped me too. You know." She blinked. "How you reminded me how much a moment can change a life." Evelyn watched them, her daughter, the man she never expected, the little girl who now called her almost mom without hesitation. And in that moment, something settled. This wasn't a second chance at the same life. It was a new one entirely. That night, back at Daniel's apartment, the girls curled up under the same blanket, watching a movie. Lily's head rested on Emma's shoulder. Evelyn sat beside Daniel on the couch, not needing to fill the silence. Daniel glanced at her. "You ever think about how strange this all is?" She smiled. "Every day. But would you change it?" She shook her head. "No, not one part." He reached over and took her hand, not because it was a performance or because they needed to prove anything, but because it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They didn't have a blueprint for what they were building. No labels, no certainty, just a bond forged in fear, strengthened in trust, and rooted in love. And as the credits rolled on the movie and the girls drifted off to sleep, Evelyn leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder and whispered, "I thought I had everything, but I never really had this." Daniel looked at her. "No one ever expects family to look like this," he said, "but sometimes it's exactly what we need." Outside, the city pulsed on, but inside that small apartment, a new story had begun, not perfect, but real and finally full.